Hey, what's up? This is Grow Food SA. This is Brian Gordon. Today we're going to be planting a fruit tree, so you'll be able to see how to plant and prune this. What is going on here with this? Okay, where were we? So today we are planting a fruit tree. We're going to be planting the youve persimmons. So these look delicious. They're not ready yet. We got to plant the tree. First thing you want to look for is whenever you are planting the tree, you want to make sure you look for the right spot. So most fruit trees like full sun. There's a couple of varieties that will tolerate some of the shade and still be able to produce some in the shade, but not with the same production sometimes. So generally it's full sun area, but you know, in South Texas, shade can be a benefit, or dapple shade and stuff like that. So some of those options can be available. Today we're going to be planting in full sun here. And so the first thing to kind of keep in mind is whenever you dig out your hole, you want it to be the same depth as this pot here. So the soil comes up to right about here. So we want to dig our hole this deep. You know, we want it to sit on solid soil, but what we want is the hole to be bigger than the plant. So sometimes they say about 2 times the size of the container, you know. So really what that idea is whenever you're planting, and like some of our region has a lot of clay, if you dig out this like clay, it's basically almost like planting right into a pot, you know, and you want to have that soil disrupted around it so that the roots can grow freely. And you want it to be in a way to where the soil's been kind of broken up and it can move around in that area, and then once it starts to hit some of that final outer layer of clay, the roots have gotten enough energy and momentum where they can kind of push on outward into that clay and start moving through. So one of the first things to kind of keep in mind with that is, how do you get it out of the pot? So you usually massage the container. Comes out like that. And so we can confirm, if we put this down in the hole, what we want is we want the ground level to be at the same level as here. So it's kind of going up just a little bit, and because I sheet mulch in this area, I'm actually going to keep it just a little bit above the soil layer. And so what we're looking for is the previous area where the soil was right here, because what happens often is if people fill in too much, they'll often fill up and cover up this part of the plant, and that can choke out the tree here. You know, it can suffocate it. So we want to make sure that we're maintaining the same soil line where the plant has always grown at. Whenever we backfill in, right here, actually before we start, let's go ahead and double check. So this has been in a pot for quite some time here. So we're gonna double check, see where its roots are kind of going. I don't see any. Okay, here's a couple. So there's a couple of roots like this that were starting to bend and turn. And if you find really big ones, if small ones you can take and pull out. If you find really big ones, see, you can kind of disrupt it here to move around. It'll be okay. So I don't see any really strong. Here we go. Here's one. So here's a really big root that was spiraling. And that spiraling is what happens whenever things are grown in a container like this. There's some that you can find that come in a container that are bare root trees. And basically those are grown in the soil, pulled up, the roots are pruned, and then it's put in a bucket right before it's sold. This one was grown in the bucket. You can tell because this root was moving so much to this side. But again, since this one's not too thick, I'm not gonna go, normally you would chop it right here so that it has the opportunity to grow out in the right direction. but since it's small enough, I'm actually just going to go ahead and try to set it in the soil with it pulled back and see if I can get it to grow outward. But it's really important to start pulling any of the circular forming roots so that it can grow out in a way and not grow around. It can actually choke the plant that way too over years. So now that we've gotten the roots secured, we're going to add a little bit of fertilizer. So there's a couple of different fertilizers that are out there. Most of them will kind of do the trick. You know, we don't really have to add that much. You can easily overdo it on the fertilizer. So I'm only putting in that amount. There's just different amendments that you can add into there. I'm not sure what this mix was, but then we put it on in here. And so since some of the soil's been knocked away, we can actually still see kind of right here, this is where it was buried. That's where the old soil was. So that's where I'm going to put my line at. So it still looks pretty good. And I'm going to backfill with some of the same soil that I had just right over here. So the one thing to kind of keep in mind is you want to keep that soil the same, because this is the soil that it's going to be used to. A lot of people will want the tendency to do all compost or something like that, and what that does is it gets used to living in that compost and it doesn't get used to going into that clay. So this has some of that clay in it, it's got some materials in it, some compost, so it's a little bit mixed, and we can just use that again. Fill it all back in. You want to come up to the pre-existing soil line. I know this soil is going to settle a little bit too because it's got some organic matter in it. So I'm going to kind of build it up around this edge. Mix in some mulch around it. That's going to help protect that soil from drying out. And the last thing that you want to do is you want to just put a hose on it. You want to soak this hole. You want this hole to basically be flooding. That's going to help all of the materials and soil start to move down, fill up those pockets, so you don't really have big gaps in the soil that are going to appear later on. If it works out well, you'll see the soil drop a little bit, and then you can add some more soil till you get up back to your original soil line. So good luck growing. And always keep in mind too that one of the most important things is usually, at least in South Texas, we want to plant in the cooler season. You want to get it whenever it's kind of dormant. So this tree wasn't, it was planted a little bit late. We're getting a little bit warm. So one thing that we're going to kind of do is try to prune some of it to help with some of the shock that just kind of happened, and to help the roots focus on development here. So we're going to take out some of the smaller branches that are in here. So we want it to be watered in pretty well. We want it to be soaking. You know, you can let it pool up like that and settle in, but really the point is to help let all that soil settle there. So while we're doing that, we're also going to take the opportunity to prune some. So this branch right here is going out towards my pathway here, so I don't really want it, and plus it's maybe a little bit too low. Once it gets some fruit on it, these fruit are heavy and it's gonna bend that down. So I'm gonna go ahead and let some of the branches that are taller stay up here. So we got a couple other smaller branches right up here. I'm gonna take those out. And so that leaves just a couple of branches here on the top that'll be coming outward. And really that's what we want. We want to maintain just a couple of the strong branches so that new growth will be focused onto these. There's also, if it's bare root and you plant it while it's dormant, you actually come in and you just chop it off midway up this whole stalk here. So it's kind of dramatic looking, and scary, but that actually really promotes those roots that have been pruned in a bare root process. It helps them grow outward. So that's only if it's bare root. This one wasn't. I can see some of the roots that were circling in there, so I know this was grown in the pot. And so unless I were to cut some of those root systems off, that's maybe the only time that I would really have to take some heavy stuff off of the top.